Good afternoon, brothers, and welcome to episode 4. That's right, episode 4 of Pod Kappa Tau, the podcast about anything and everything Phi Kappa Tau. It's officially July 1st. I have no idea where summer went, to be honest with you. It's been one heck of a ride so far here at the executive offices, but Conclave is just right around the corner. On today's episode, we have the Associate Director of Chapter Services, Mr. Brandon Lewis, who is a man of great knowledge, knows many big words, and we are going to sit down to discuss his role, colony development and alumni engagement, which also is part of his role, and the new Borodale Challenge. Hope you all enjoy. Now I'm joined by the Associate Director of Chapter Services, Mr. Brandon Lewis. Brandon, thank you for coming on.
It's nice to be here, Zach. Thank you for the invite.
Of course. So just diving right into it, you yourself, you're originally from Tennessee, joined the Zeta Lambda colony. You are now the second Zeta Lambda on the podcast out of 4. So
exciting.
That is exciting. But one of the things that we teach on the road is the Founding Father experience of getting to expand to these different colleges and whatnot, and what the whole Founding Father experience brings of, you're building this chapter up, you're working towards a common goal, you'll get to come back and see your name on a charter, stuff like that. When you go back to your Zeta Lambda colony and you're like, hey, I helped found that, is that something that's special to you?
It's incredibly special. A little bit more about my experience and why I feel so strongly about not only Phi Tau, but especially being in a colony is directly related to the fact of when I joined my colony. Because I joined Zeta Lambda chapter, colony at the time, colonized in November 2013. That was at the tail end of my first semester, my junior year of college. So I had an entire 2.5 years of school before even joining Phi Tau, where I had plenty of other opportunities to join fraternities, was heavily recruited specifically by one, but none of them had that values-based experience that I wanted. And it took until my junior year before I found that. So I have this unique dichotomy to where, I had an entire 2.5 years before school, before joining a fraternity. And I know what my life was like then. I know what my scholastics were like then. I knew what my education and so forth was like then. And then afterwards was a completely different experience for me. So I know what it can do for a student because I know what kind of student I was beforehand. So I do have that very strong value in not only a colony experience, but in what Phi Tau did for myself.
So would you say mainly that you joined the colony because they had the, the intangibles that you were looking for that maybe you didn't find in other fraternities on campus?
I'd say so. It also got me the opportunity, since I was an older student, to get deeply involved in starting something from scratch that I knew other fraternities just really didn't offer at that point. Because I would have joined a fraternity that had been existing for 10 plus years, had some kind of tradition, had other officers, so forth, and I wouldn't be able to immediately get in there and make the impact that I knew I wanted. So joining something from scratch with, at the time, 10 other people was definitely a big attractive piece for me.
So you all chartered in 2015, correct?
We did, August 2015.
Were you graduated at that point?
I was not. I took a couple victory laps, had savored experience, and changed my major way too many times. So we chartered the beginning of my last senior year, and then I graduated that May of 2016.
Was that something that you all... I obviously you're going to be happy, but was that like a more special day in your life of getting to, finally, after all those, months and potentially years of working towards it, was that something that, kind of is what the creed says, like that you take just pride in, one of your more like memorable days from college in Phi Tau?
It is without hesitation the most memorable college experience I had, because I had that 2 years, because as I said, we colonized in November, I was recruited in October. So we had this 2 years of getting this idea, getting this name, Phi Kappa Tau. We had never been on MTSU's campus before. Getting that name to mean something on our campus. And we had our ups and downs, and there were plenty of valleys, but there were plenty of mountains as well. And with that adversity, we became such a strong unit that founding father class, because we had to create something from just an idea, from just what could be. And absolutely because of that, it is the most rewarding thing I did when I was in college. I still remember every moment from my initiation into the fraternity and everything related to our post-initiation conversations, to our chartering. I still remember the speech. Our faculty advisor, Danny Kelly, spoke to us saying how proud he was of us and all the work that we did. What our domain director, Michael Loomis, said about, because as he was also a founding father of his chapter at Belmont, remember so vividly because it was such a rewarding experience.
Kind of flipping gears now,
Sure.
After graduation, you start off as a success manager, correct?
I did.
How did you get involved with the executive offices, and how, I guess, talk about, your time as a success manager?
Yeah, certainly. So I initially learned of the job from Travis Robinson, who was doing I can't remember what it was called, but it was like a small breakout at Conclave in 2015 for people who would be interested in working for staff. So that was my first interaction with the potential for working. So once the job came rolling around, fortunately I was on the short list of people to contact, and heard of the opportunity then and immediately kind of latched on the moment I heard from it, because I always wanted to give back more to the fraternity, and working for it at the moment was an easy yes. It was me selling myself to the fraternity. There was no convincing me to not take the job at that point. So my first year, it was interesting because, as I said, I did not have a traditional fraternity experience by any means. So there was a learning curve of me interacting with, the 40 groups I had, and understanding the deep roots of alumni and the importance of having those advisors. Because we did have advisors, and I appreciate them very much for the work that they did, especially our Board of Governors Chair, Philip Key. But it's very different having alumni from your own chapter and having that deep rooted history, because we didn't have that. So my learning curve was understanding how big of a context that adds to how chapters operate and act, is that history and that tradition, because we didn't have any. But it was a wonderful time. I learned so much about just how and what Phi Tau means to so many different people, young and old, realizing that every type of fraternity that can exists in Phi Tau. Within the 161 chapters that exist, there's a whole lot of variety in there. But within that variety, there's still the same challenges. There's still the same wins, wants, the same people. They're just in slightly different schools, regions, backgrounds.
Right. And so after the success manager position, you were in there for 1 year or 2 years?
So I was in there for 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then now you're the associate director of chapter services. So what all exactly does that position entail for you?
Yeah, that is a great question. Unfortunately, it means I'm kind of a jack of all trades and fill a variety of different roles for the office on a needs basis. But specifically work with 3 different mini departments within Phi Tau. One is that I am the supervisor for the success management team, which includes Alex Haller, who's also from my chapter, Jacob Reese from Delta Omega, and now Drake Berlin from Phi. So oversee 3 success managers who I'm sure we'll get to a little later on the charge of that team. The second charge is colony development itself. So, obviously you, Eli, who you interviewed in week 1, and Alex, who you interviewed in week 1, serve as our national recruiters who go and recruit awesome quality guys to join our fraternities. Once they become a colony, it is in my charge to train them and support them to get to that finish line of a colony experience, which is chartering. And I do that primary support. The third aspect of my role is supporting our graduate council initiatives through the training and support and supervision of our 9 domain directors. So working with this new I suppose the idea is a year old, but relatively new switch to our domain director's responsibilities, which is incredibly big opportunity for us to really boost alumni engagement as an organization. We've realized that's a big area of improvement and an area of opportunity for us, because we just know, and this is with any alumni group of anything in life, alumni engagement directly leads to better alumni volunteers, which leads to a higher performing chapter, and all the great things that come for that. So leading the success management team, overseeing colony development, and then overseeing our alumni engagement.
So for the success managers now, like you mentioned, we just added Drake Berlin. He's now the third success manager, something that's been talked about, floated about for what seems like a little while now. What do you think that the third success manager will now bring to the table in terms of that department?
I think having the third success manager adds a lot to our ability to make connections with our chapters. I think the one limiting factor of having two success managers, that having three relieves a lot, was just it's hard to have truly genuine relationships with 40 people.
Right.
There's some science and psychology behind how many good friends you can have within a certain period of time. I don't recall what that number is off the top of my head, but it's certainly not 40. So we know and understand that the key to our job working well, so coaching our chapter leaders to achieve the goals that not only we know will help them, but that they want to achieve, we know that that's predicated on our ability to have rapport. And the basics of rapport is relationships and trust. And it's hard to do that with 40 groups. We feel that adding Drake limits that number down to 27, which makes that goal a lot more reasonable. This also allows us to connect a lot deeper and with a lot more truth and veracity, the experiences of other members of the chapters as well. So this allows us to also talk to the vice president, to also talk to the recruitment chair, and really dive into what they want as a chapter experience as well. Because the president is important. He's the chief officer, but he's not the only person in the chapter, and other people have their struggles, they have their goals, and we have the ability to help them. So because of that, we have the responsibility too. So both of those, so just deepening those relationships by having more frequent touch points with our board of governors, having more frequent touch points with our fraternity and sorority advisors, having more time to travel to chapters and have that face-to-face interaction where it's going to be beneficial. Drake's joining of staff offers us the ability to dive a lot deeper when it comes to that.
So do you think now moving forward we'll have, you said, more time to visit chapters? Do you think that could become a more frequent thing if they, have the right reasons, or, they really need their success manager to come and help out for a little bit? Do you see that becoming a more prevalent thing, and more so not necessarily leaning towards like a regional leadership consultant model, but
Sure.
more so just like they're on the road more than what they normally would be?
So I'd say yes to a certain extent. The addition of Drake also led us to change our model to being more regional, regardless. So Jacob is, now the West Coast success manager. Alex is the Southeast success manager, and Drake is the Midwest/Northeast success manager. And fortunately, our chapter breakdowns allowed us to pretty much use complete geography, and the chapter assignments are pretty equal because of that. So fortunately, they are switching to a regional model, which also supports our ability to travel, because then all your chapters are at least in the same part of the country, which logistically makes that a lot easier. Now, moving to the comparison of the leadership consultant model that a few of our peer organizations use or have used in the past, as well as we used it in the last decade. I think this offers us the ability to be more intentional with our travel, while also providing that opportunity as well. I don't believe we ever want to get into the philosophy of traveling just to check a box or just to, you know, just as a routine. We know there is some potential merits in that, but there is also wasted energy and wasted time. But it absolutely does give us the opportunity where more frequent travel for intentional reasons, such as facilitating a building men of character retreat, which I know that they are excited for doing, facilitating the great retreats, things more of that nature, but not really to check a box.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I definitely think that'll be beneficial. And I know Tristan, when I interviewed him a couple weeks ago, he kind of said the same thing, is that, you know, with the 2 guys, even with 3, it still has to be intentional of why you're going to be hitting the road. But now you might have a little bit more freedom to do so. But, you know, you yourself have now worked with both colonies and chartered chapters.
Yes.
Which would you say is harder working with? Would it be the colonies trying to develop them up to getting chartered, or would it be the chartered chapters who might face, you know, maybe some bigger issues?
Yeah, I think both groups have their own challenges. I wouldn't say any is necessarily harder than the others. Colonies certainly require a little bit more TLC just because they're in a system of uncertainty and not having the foundation that a lot of chapters have. So creating that foundation is a big charge of colony development. But I wouldn't say that either one is necessarily harder. I'd say one of the wonderful things working with a colony is the fact that there is not that context. So the willingness to accept new ideas and pilot new programs for us, colonies are quite literally the best because you don't have to hit against tradition of the chapter.
Right.
You know, that being said, you know, there's still campus culture that
Right.
does exist. But it's certainly a lot easier to facilitate organizational institutional change through a colony than your standard chapter. That being said, none of this occurs with a black or white yes or no. You know, there are plenty of chapters that are more than willing to pilot programs. There are plenty of chapters who are more than willing to change and be those vanguards for organization. But it's simply just more common in colonies due to being new.
Would you say the biggest problem that every chapter faces, or at least that most chapters face, would be recruitment, or would you say it's more a different problem?
I'd say that, you know, recruitment being the lifeblood of our organizations and, you know, quite literally how we, you know, keep the ship, you know, steaming ahead. It is certainly incredibly important, but I think the issues a lot of our chapters face are a tad bit deeper than that. I'd say if you look at a wound, if you can follow this metaphor that I'm making up on the spot. If you look at a wound, you can see a cut and think, okay, a good solution for this cut is to simply put a Band-Aid on it. But in reality, the Band-Aid doesn't actually solve the issue. It just simply makes the symptoms less. So recruitment can very often make symptoms less, but the deeper issues of a lot of our groups are a lot more complicated, and there's not one size fits all. So recruitment's a very easy Band-Aid. Now, the application of that Band-Aid, so improving recruitment's not easy by any means, but it's a very often easy fix that if our chapters just recruit better, then a lot of our issues will solve themselves. But that's not always the case. It is the case in some groups.
Right.
But it's not always the case.
Okay. I like that metaphor, even though you just made it up on the spot. I like it. Yeah, I mean, I definitely can agree with you there. I think for sure, wow, that was really good. I think for sure that recruitment's definitely, like you said, an easier Band-Aid, and, you know, improving recruitment and getting guys more intentionally, and kind of what, they'll be talking about at Conclave and whatnot of how to go about recruitment, you know, splitting guys into teams, like coming up with a plan, stuff like that. So there's your Conclave pitch, everybody. Please come to Conclave. It will be mainly recruitment based. But kind of switching gears here now off the chapters.
Sure.
Talking, you mentioned the new idea and remake of the domain directors.
Absolutely.
Was that something that you had a say in, or was that kind of just handed down to you? Kind of talk about like the new structural change and what each domain director now is like going to be doing.
Yeah, so the change had been in the works for a decent amount of time, back even when I first started back in 2016, and just really trying to figure out what can we use our national advisors for, it'd be the best use of their time, and make the most positive change within our organization. And alumni engagement is, where the office landed on. I was not directly involved in those conversations, but I was very frequently updated with how things were going,
right,
before I got into the role of Associate Director of Chapter Services. So when that change did occur, since as I had been a part of and interacted with a decent amount of domain directors, I was absolutely on board with the necessary change, and do feel that although there is a decent amount of work that still needs to be done, as with anything on the national level, nothing's solved in a year, and this certainly is an exception to that. We have made headways and have gotten to the point where now it's just building the house. We know what the house wants to look like. We know exactly where to build the pillars. We know exactly how long it potentially may take to, build the foundation. It just needs to be executed on. But the change and overall push towards more engaged alumni directly positively correlates to anything else within not only chapter operations, but us on a national and regional level as well. Because more engaged alumni leads to more engagement with the foundation, both on a local level and on a chapter level as well, which leads to better opportunities for our chapter leaders.
Right. And one of the things, like you keep touching on, is alumni engagement. I know one thing that I've kind of just noticed from popping up the past couple months is more like regional alumni events. Like there's one in D.C. I know Absolutely. I just saw one. I think it's up in the Northeast somewhere. Is that something that
New York,
is that something that the 9 domain directors are mainly like going to be in charge of? Or is that like a specific way that they're going to go about alumni engagement, is having these events, getting these guys reinvigorated with the fraternity?
Yes. So that is one of their charges, is through regional alumni events on a regular basis, which regular is relative to the domain, to have these opportunities for fellow alumni to come and fellowship. So the one you mentioned in New York, that is a work that both Sasha and Phil, who are the New England domain directors and the Capital domain director, that they've been working on together, is getting that engagement for that region of the country, so that you will see more of that in every region as the foundation gets more established for this program.
I like that. I think that's really awesome. I think that for sure that's definitely something that we need to be doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because there are a lot of guys that, that are 4 years and done. I know myself, I was kind of thinking the same thing, like, well, I'm about to graduate, like, I guess I'm done, like, this might be it, like, the end of my Phi Tau road, like, as far as, directly being involved, because I didn't know where I was going to end up, and then, sure enough, I get hired here. But just going back into your position
Sure.
a little bit, one of the things that you've kind of got to do is travel a lot through our various charterings throughout the year. With each new colony that we expand to, you go out and you do what we call framework for 3 days, kind of show them the ropes of how to be a colony, go through all the chapter positions, stuff like that. What has been your favorite part about traveling on the road, as well as how have you made your role your own?
Certainly. Great questions. So I'll answer the favorite part of being on the road in 2 different ways. One on a personal level, and 2 more related to the actual job responsibilities at Phi Tau. For me, when it comes to job responsibilities at Phi Tau, my favorite part has been that interaction, training, talks, meetings with colony guys, because it brings me back to when I joined, and I see that same hope. I see that same drive for something bigger than myself that I can't even see yet. That I can't really see the entire hill at this point, but I see it and I know it's there. And it's wonderful to see that same drive and ambition within these Colony guys, especially like meeting with Colony like presidents and membership orientation officers, because that was my position when the Colony first started. So it's great to meet with them and be able to genuinely say, I understand how you feel, because it's still fresh in my mind, that beginning of that journey. As far as on a personal level, being able to see such different parts of the country is just super fascinating to me. Before taking this job, I had only traveled like to some parts of like the Southeast, but probably the furthest was like going to Florida. Everywhere else was like roughly around Nashville, which is where I'm from. So being able to travel and meet and interact with such a diverse group of people and seeing such a diverse views of the world. Because I mean, if you go and meet with someone who's lived in Southern California their entire life, they're going to be very different than someone who's lived in Boston for the past 20 years. They're going to be very different people. But even with that, they're all similar. They still care about the same human things that everyone cares about. And making those connections and building those bridges is such a worthwhile experience.
Right. So one thing, a bit of news, I don't know if you saw, but Whataburger actually just got bought out by an investment bank in Chicago, and they're looking to expand into the Midwest, which...
Oh my goodness, I did not see that.
Great news for us. Apparently all of Texas is mad, but that's great news for everybody else. So with being on the road, got to ask, Whataburger or In-N-Out?
Oh, that is an excellent question. All right, so Whataburger Breakfast, 1,000%. That's the best fast food breakfast on the planet.
Agreed.
They have, what is it, the honey
butter chicken biscuit.
Honey butter chicken biscuit.
Yes.
That honestly might be my favorite like biscuit like sandwich ever, which is probably sacrilegious to say being from the South, but I absolutely the case. And then, but for like main burger, getting a In-N-Out double burger, animal style, toasted, which is where they toast the bread. And
I didn't know that was a thing.
And then animal style fries, but having the fries done well done is incredible. Best fast food burger I've ever had.
Okay.
Which my list of fast food burgers is a little limited, so I'll put that disclaimer out there. But definitely the best like combination.
Okay, yeah. I respect it. I didn't even know that toasted buns was a thing.
It is, yeah.
And now, lastly, every week we try to do a topic of the week. This week we are kind of dive into something that just recently changed the school year, the Bordale Challenge.
Absolutely.
What can we make of this Bordale Challenge? Why did it change? Just kind of talk about it.
Absolutely. Great question. So for a little bit of context as well, 2018 was the first year of the new updated Bordale Challenge, which were some changes we made all throughout 2017 with the consult of the National Council, the Bordale Challenge Committee Chair, who is Jacob Raderer from Center College, the console of our undergraduate advisory boards, as well as a few other select undergrads who we bounced several ideas off of. And what we came up with was the new Bordale Challenge. Our philosophy when making these changes was to look at what work our high-performing chapters are doing and reset the standard based on what our chapters are already doing. So we rebranded the direct standings of each of the 13 metrics. Meets expectations is the new basic. Exceeds expectations is the new order of the star. Then outstanding was the new Maxwell when it comes to each standing. There are still overall chapter statuses, which are Maxwell, order, star, basic, but each individual metric has its own level. And we set the expectation based on looking at a bell curve. So imagine a bell curve in your mind, or physically write a bell curve if that's more helpful. and we looked at what's our 50th percentile doing. So that's the mean, median. My apologies. So that's the median right there, that 50th percentile. What are they doing in this metric? And shouldn't that be the expectation? Shouldn't what roughly half our chapters do, shouldn't that be at least the baseline expectation? And we followed that mindset with every metric, and that's why the numbers change. It changed to whatever the median was. And then we looked at for exceeds expectations, and we were like, so what do we consider to be above average when it comes to our chapters? And we looked at, for that situation, we're going to look at the 66th percentile. So what are the top third of our chapters doing? And we set the metric based on that. Then we looked at, for outstanding, we looked at what are our top 15% of our chapters. So our truly excelling chapters do in these metrics. And we followed the same logic there. And that's how we updated all the metrics. For the new metrics, we looked at a combination of what are some of our peer organizations are currently tracking, and not only just blindly looking at that, but also having conversations with them on what impact they saw their organization when they started awarding, and giving that, giving that recognition. There we go. Giving that recognition for these behaviors. How have they improved? And we saw a lot of positive things once we included what we did include. So that's where the new metrics came from in that. As far as what to really make of those changes, I'd say that know that if, and I'd like to use another metaphor, but if you're constantly practicing kicking only 20-yard field goals, how are you going to be able to kick a 40-yarder? You have to move back from the goalpost in order to improve your performance. You have to be challenged. And we know that this is possible because these are the things our chapters are already doing. This was not us just choosing a high goal that's unattainable. These are what you all are already doing. So continue to do the great work you're doing and challenge yourself to do slightly better and constantly move forward.
I think that perfectly sums it up. Just challenging everybody to do just a little bit better. Not so much more, but just do a little bit better and, really reach for even higher goals, like you said, for, our top 15% of the chapters, especially.
Absolutely.
Well, Brandon, I thank you very much for coming on to the podcast today. And
thank you, Zach.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and talk to you soon.
Absolutely.
Well, that's it for episode 4. I hope you all enjoyed getting a little bit of insight into his position, and maybe you'll agree with his take on the old Whataburger versus In-N-Out debate. I can't say that I necessarily do, but hopefully more Whataburgers start popping up all over the U.S. Also, don't forget that Conclave is July 12th through the 14th. You will not want to miss the Phi Tau homecoming to where we were founded 113 years ago, right here in beautiful Oxford, Ohio. You'll get to see all of our historic landmarks on Miami's campus, the Alpha House, as well as get to attend our Series Funathon, which hopefully your chapter's fundraising for in the competition amongst all the active chapters in the nation, as well as you get to go up against the executive office's staff. Your chapter will get philanthropy credit if you fundraise for it through the Crowd Change page. Check out the Phi Tau social media pages at Phi Kappa Tau for more details about that, and please still sign up since it's already going to be next week. That's hard to believe. Also, please sign up your chapter's 2 representatives for Leadership Academy in Georgia. You still have time since it's at the end of July, but please make sure that you do that so your chapter gets credit for that. Thanks for tuning into this week's episode. Hope you all have a great week, and remember to tune in next Monday when we interview the Associate Director of Organizational Growth, Mr. Daryl Thompson.
We are brothers now and ever, until the day we die. And when that time comes rolling round, and we bid our last goodbye, there is one thing sure and certain. Let